Welcome everybody to the first ever Oscuro podcast, which is all about forgotten games, cancelled games, and how we find these games and how we go about actually, researching them and trying to get people to talk to us, which many times fails. So today I'm joined by Elwood, who is a co-writer for the next episode of the Oscuro series,
Hello,
which will
guys.
be revealed today. So do you want to say something about yourself?
I am the co-writer for this upcoming episode. I've also done quality assurance for the last documentary and a lot of the videos that go onto the Chicken channel. So all of the content that you've seen so far, I've had a bit of a hand in that.
Okay, good. And yeah, like this podcast is basically my idea of introducing some interesting content, informative content, uh, which has to do with the big productions like Oscuro, and in the future maybe another documentary series, which is still in the works of conceptualization. And essentially, there are some news behind why the podcast is now a thing. Because before it wouldn't have been a thing that I would have wanted to do, but now I am very restricted on time. And that is because I have a job now. And the job has nothing to do with video, which I think is something good. And yeah, what the job is, I mean, I work now as a caregiver, caretaker, however it's called in English, in an old folks
Caretaker.
home. Which means that every month I will actually get quite a bit of money from my job, which I can then use for many different things. Like, for instance, smart bulbs that I have installed to give videos a better aesthetic, or this new microphone, which I still have to properly set up, so maybe it's gonna sound a little bit funky. But yeah, now with the new job, we have a little bit of a budget to play with the productions, which is pretty good.
We
And
have
I
some
can
actual
still,
money. We're not just making this out of thin air.
yeah. So now I can actually use something called money, and there's also a thing here, a thing that of course I am not gonna show you, but it's a it's a Visa card, as you can see. And no, I'm not gonna show the number, because the number, if you see the number, then well, it's gonna be a bad day for me, a very good day for you. Uh, so yeah, what is the game? What is the game that's gonna come up in the next episode of Oscuro?
Okay, you're letting me do the reveal. I appreciate that. Okay, so Oscuro episode 2 is going to be about a game called Reich. It's alternate
Reich.
history,
So
first person
Reich.
shooter. Yeah.
I wasn't aware that it was called Reich.
Oh, sorry, Reich.
Reich. Yeah. So that's the game, Reich. It's an interesting game. It's essentially, it's a game where you shoot Nazis. Nothing too revolutionary, you would think. I mean, we have Wolfenstein. We have, what are other games where you shoot Nazis? Battlefield, Call of Duty. I don't know, like any game in the Second World War or that parodies the Second World War in some way. So
Pretty much.
it doesn't sound too revolutionary, too unusual, but the details are in the fine print. And what is the fine print? Essentially, it's a game where you can destroy all your surroundings with Jedi powers. So imagine you're Luke Skywalker, just you're cutting down Nazis with assault rifles instead of lightsabers, and you throw buildings around and like destroy everything. That's essentially what that game was. And we have actually been able to reach out to people and do interviews, which is something that is pretty crazy. We never did that before. And I really utilized my time well during a few months where I had all the time in the world, honestly, and I could just arrange interviews left, right, and center. So this is a project that I thought would never actually come to fruition, and now we are actually in the stages of preparing a script, preparing for production, and brainstorming how we visualize, how we arrange interview quotes, stuff like that. So we are actually going into production pretty
Mhm.
soon.
And it's a process that has been a long time coming. This is a project that has needed a lot more research than the HAB 12 one, because the HAB 12 one, it was a fairly easy to understand tale, you know, and less controversial. The developers all got on well. They enjoyed the project. They got on with us. They were happy to talk to us and give us all sorts. This one, we had to dig a lot deeper to get the material we needed to make this documentary. We had to talk to loads of developers. We had to seek them out. And we managed in the end to get hours and hours and hours of extensive interview material that gives major insights into the game itself, the absolutely batshit crazy development process behind it, and its history. And let me tell you, if you thought the HAB 12 documentary was interesting, you ain't seen nothing yet. This is a much more dramatic story with a much bigger game. And it's a story that we're really looking forward to telling, and one we've had to do quite the balancing act with the script to give the story justice.
Yeah, for one thing that is way more interesting about this project than the HAB 12 project. Uh, if you okay, let's keep the theme going with German lingo and things that Americans and anyone that isn't German honestly cannot ever pronounce. If you ever have Schadenfreude, then or if you hate me, there is a good chance that we might get sued. So that's something to look forward to, some little drama. But I'm actually not making a joke right now. Some information that we came across is pretty sensitive, so there is a lot of, as you said, balancing acts that we have to do regarding this
Yeah.
project, because if we miscalculate something, we can get in a lot of trouble.
Exactly. This is a story that gets quite dark in a lot of places, quite dramatic, quite serious. And there is some stuff, some accusations we have to weigh up whether they're the kinds of things we can actually mention publicly.
Yeah.
You know, we have heard a lot of crazy stories about this project, and it's the kind of stuff that normally you would hear and just straight away dismiss for not being believable. And we heard a lot of horror stories about this project. But when we actually went and we interviewed person after person after person, and we put these examples of things that happened to them, they would validate the claims. Reich, without going into the specifics, it was a shit show of a project involving lots of mismanagement, lots of poor handling, and that led to a lot of resentful, stressed out, and very frustrated employees, a lot of whom were very keen to vent those frustrations to us. And that's how we got our story in the end.
And that is also another point where we have to be a bit careful, and that is that nothing that we found, at least not many things that we found from people that we talked to, are not really facts. And that is a thing that is gonna be a bit difficult with this documentary production when compared to HAB 12. I mean, for HAB 12, a lot of things also weren't really facts, because, for instance, the HAB 12 guys, they like the Red Loop guys, they might have just portrayed themselves as being this little like group of friends that are all geniuses that love each other, and they made a game together. And we cannot verify what happened at a time where I wasn't even alive in, so it's impossible. But in the case for Reich, we have a project that way more people were involved in, and we also heard a lot of experiences. Like one animator, Corey Collins, and I can't say that name for sure because he told me that I can use it. That guy, for instance, he was just happy to animate stuff. So even though there was a lot of company drama, he just kept animating, and he loved animating. Meanwhile, there were others, like one unnamed artist that's really, really got the short end of the stick in this production, and is still very sore about it, with many good reasons why. And that is really the thing. How do you balance, you know, how do you like how do you get the confidence of saying, okay, let's put this in the doc because it most likely happened, or let's omit this because it either isn't relevant or there is not enough, overlapping stories with it. So what I did for the interviews, because I conducted every interview so far, I essentially asked some questions that are pretty much the same. Like for instance, when it comes to specific people that we found, that you will get acquainted with quite a few names when the documentary comes out. I asked some of the same few questions to pretty much everyone that I interviewed, and stories they got confirmed pretty quick. So pretty much almost everything that we found in the public domain regarding this project has been verified by this point. And that is the thing that is interesting about this project. Just the insanity of it all and the fact that it actually happened, according to various people that we asked. I think it's at least 6 to 8 people that we interviewed total. I'm not quite sure. There's some that are still up for an interview, but I just didn't have the time to actually interview them, or like one person actually ghosted me. Then that's another thing. Like, it's a bit frustrating, but at the same time, it's very understandable. I had one situation where an interview was set up with someone that worked on the game, and of course, I'm not gonna say the specialization that he had because it would be kind of a dick move. Because I don't know how many people actually worked on the project in specific departments, so it could be easy to track down who it is. But for instance, there was one person that I set up an interview with, a phone interview, and then I mentioned that I'm recording it, so then he pulled out of it. And that is, for instance, something that is also a bit tricky, like interviews. I think that, like, if you do interview based stuff, if you want to know about a project, and you talk to people to like figure out what happened or whatever, you should record everything. Not just for using it in a film, but also for future reference. If you need to go back to it, then you can. And what if you can't go back to it? That's the big problem. So that was one loss of an interview, of a potential like interviewee that was a little bit of a burn. But I think in the grand scheme of things, we have everything. Also, there's one guy that actually expected us to pay him, and my man, we now have a budget. You're not getting paid. If you're seeing this, you're not getting paid. Okay, I'm not paying you. Okay, I'm not paying you. Anyways.
He seems very sure. You seem very sure.
Yeah. And also, I think either you or Emjo or someone else on the project, like, were like, well, you should be like polite and say that, like, write him again and say that you sadly couldn't get any funds. Sorry, I didn't do that. You don't get any money. I'm not paying you.
Yeah, this guy asked us for money in exchange for his time for an interview, and then we immediately got a bunch of other people writing back to us who would give up their time for interviews for free. So that exchange very quickly became not worthwhile in the slightest. But
yeah.
yeah, this was a very big project that we talked to a lot of people on, and that is a problem. Is because of the controversy surrounding it. There are some people who simply will not, go on camera or go on voice to talk about their experiences, either because they're afraid of the potential backlash or simply because it's just too painful of an experience to look back on. And I know right now, while we're not giving a lot of the specifics and the details, this seems, a bit hard to understand. But once you actually watch the documentary, you'll very quickly see why people do not want to talk about this.
Yeah.
There's basically two camps of people we talk to. We talk to some people who were really eager to get this stuff off their chests because they had such a terrible time and they wanted to rant about it, or just because they found about this game that has been dead for ages and actually making something on it. They found that interesting. And then you have the other bunch of people who are very, very keen to forget this project, who don't even want to, give it a passing thought. And it was a very messy one in basically every aspect of its development. It was a very great looking game. It could have been really well done if it was properly managed. But long story short, it wasn't. And that is why we're here covering it.
Yeah. And that's also the thing about Oscuro that is, kind of that's the one thing that is like frustrating about researching these like canceled games. Sometimes you come across something and you get an obsession over it, and you're so obsessed about that game or piece of media that you need to find it. And then you actually get closer to your goal, and then suddenly like your ambitions to actually find the game almost drop completely to zero, because with Reich, the more I found out about the project, the less I was interested in actually getting my hands on a prototype build. That doesn't mean that I completely gave up on finding one. I think there is a good chance of finding a prototype, especially after the documentary releases, or before it releases. We might actually find some contacts that actually have some data. Just that, I don't know, just like finding out about people, working in bad conditions, having tyrannical bosses, that kind of stuff. And then the game project being remade over and over again. That's something that we wondered about, because if you find videos in the public domain, which we mirrored these videos on my on a new channel that I created called the Oscuro Archive, which essentially is a archival kind of channel for all the videos in the public domain and videos that we found and were given by other people.
Yeah, it's basically a channel that we manage, where we store all of the video material on the games that we're covering.
Yeah.
Some stuff will be unlisted, simply because it's not the kind of thing we can put in the public domain because it was provided to us privately. Other stuff is in the public domain, and we can show that off, and probably we will do in the coming weeks, and that will give you a little bit more insight into Reich, because now we've actually revealed we're covering this game called Reich, but no one really knows what that actually is beyond the brief description. And well, in time you'll be able to see some of this game. You'll be able to see how it was quite ambitious, how it was this bombastic action game, and how the design was borderline schizophrenic in how it repeatedly changed design, visual style,
Yeah.
throughout the development process.
And that's exactly the thing I just wanted to talk about. Like,
Mm.
when you actually go out and find these videos and you watch them, you will notice that there's like 4 different aesthetics that you find. One, at the very earliest, is pretty much not really the game Reich itself. It's like its predecessor called Self-Factor Evolution. That's, by the way, something that you can download right now and play. Self-Factor Evolution. It's a physics first-person tech demo for like early physics cards. Then you have a newer kind of aesthetic, but then that one was replaced with another one. That one was replaced with another one. And, when the aesthetics changed, at least, when we go from the second game build to the third and final game build, basically, development was reversed. And like progress that has been made in one game build has been completely zeroed. So just imagine that. Just imagine for a second you work on something for an entire year or more, and then a new guy comes in and says, we're gonna scrap that.
Yeah, this is a game that went through several different revisions, to the point where older versions of the game compared to newer versions don't even look like the same project. it's normal for games to go through lots of changes in things like design, visual style, gameplay elements. But in this, it was a case of, you would get more or less remade every few years in its development cycle. And more or less no elements from one version of the game would carry over to the next, meaning that you would get, programmers, artists, designers who would spend countless hours over countless days making material for this game, only for it to be thrown out. That work, that time made completely worthless. Would get a new director in who just decides they want to completely overhaul the vision of the game, and somehow, nothing that was made beforehand was important. Basically, Reich as a game had a very simple framework, which was this dystopian far future where the Nazis won the war. You live under the tyranny of the Third, or more like Fourth Reich, which is planning to create a new master race, and you become part of the resistance against this. That's basically the framework of the game. You get that plot line, you get this common gameplay element of first person gunplay combined with psi powers, where you can tear up the environment, you can throw stuff around, that kind of thing. That was basically constant throughout the game's life cycle. But pretty much everything else, how the Nazis looked, how the entire world looked, how all the characters were, some of the details of these gameplay mechanics, they would change constantly. And it just led to a completely unsustainable way of developing. Because at the end of the day, if every few years you just throw out everything you've made before and decide to start anew when you're making a game, well, you're never going to get to the finish line. Because if you keep stopping yourself, trashing everything, and running back to the start, inevitably you are doomed to failure. And that was the unfortunate loss of Reich. Because Reich, in all of its iterations, was a very game that undoubtedly would have been really impressive for its time, and even today if it had been released. But it's just too much of that vision was marked by mismanagement, and too much of it was an outright fabrication where people would spend more time making demos to impress their higher ups than actually making a game.
And that is a crazy part. The videos that we found, all of them, all of them, they didn't exist because the game was shown off to E3. The game was never publicly shown off. The only time where it might have been publicly shown off was during the Tokyo Game Show, or actually I think even in the Tokyo Game Show they showed the game behind closed doors only to investors and journalists. No, actually not even journalists. But basically all the media that exists around this game has been made to show to investors, people higher up that take decisions, and why you will see in the documentary. Because I mean, the reason for it is frankly fucking stupid.
Yeah.
Like this company, the game developer and the publisher that was like puppeteering everything, they conducted business in the weirdest of ways. And you will see like how things went on about that. But what I can say also about certain people above a project, we tried to reach out to, well, that's kind of a thing where I went into the project and I just asked people at the top without really realizing how maybe how miscalculated my inquiries would be, because I was not aware of certain people, like what role they had and what kind of disposition they had to the project, or
The damages they could do, and a lot of the frustrations that other developers had under their leadership. At the
yeah.
end of the day, this is a project that a lot of people tried to scrub from their records, that they tried to escape from. So a lot of the higher ups who were in charge of this game don't want to talk to us and probably don't want to talk to anyone about this game.
And the worst thing is they're definitely gonna see the documentary because they know that I'm working on it. And on LinkedIn, I think they know that I am reaching out to people because every time I connect with someone that they have in their friends list, it says this contact connected with another contact. This contacted this contact connected with this contact. So they know that I'm onto them. Essentially, they know that I'm digging shit up right now, and yeah, it's just a weird thing. I would wish to talk to them because I would like to, you know, get something straight. You know, to see like, am I getting bullshitted by some people? Are people actually being too butthurt about the project? I don't really think so, honestly, because if more than 5 people consistently tell me the same fucking story and they do not really deviate at all from each other and they're all frustrated and they all had their pretty bad experiences, what can you say at that point, right? Like, it's still not really a fact that things happen as they happen, but a lot of people say it did. I'm inclined to believe them.
Yeah, this is not a project that is intended to be, of anyone, a project that is intended to be malicious towards anyone. It's just that at the end of the day, when we talk to people about their frustrations surrounding the game, some names keep cropping up. And at the end of the day, if we try to reach out to those people, they don't want to talk to us. So we end up with a mindset of agreeing, or at least sympathizing with these people we talk to who tell us of these experiences, because at the end of the day, we have no contradiction to them. We have heard story after story after story, and every time we've put these stories to people we've talked to, no one has ever outright denied anything. Pretty much, almost all the stories we've asked people about, either they don't know or they outright confirm them. And given the kind of stuff that we've heard about, that is insane. And that's the crazy thing about this. This was a really, really big project that a lot of money went into, that a lot of investors were riding on, that a lot of people had stakes in. And
Yeah.
yet, pretty much no one has ever heard of it before.
And
And
this is also like why this project is so different when compared to the HAB 12 one, because the HAB 12 project, that was a that can be compared to other video games from its time, where like a group of people found a video game company, maybe get a little bit of aid from the government to actually kickstart their business. They make a game, it fails, and they go into obscurity and try to survive in some other way. Meanwhile, this game here, we're talking about a AAA production. We're talking about a AAA grand failure that stretched itself out for, I think it's at least 3 or 4 years of just constant changes and hell of design iterations. And the game is so dead. It was never even officially canceled. There's some people to this day that believe that the game might happen, which is not true. If you actually go through the trouble and look up who the IP holder right now is, it's Disney, and the IP is expired. So if you want to make a game called Reich with the same ideas, with the same concept, feel free to rip off everything you're gonna see in the public domain and that you're gonna hear about in our next documentary, because it's free game as far as we're concerned. It seems like that concept, it is novel, it is interesting, no one has ever done it before, it's still up for grabs.
yeah,
No one has ever done this. So
it was one that was dumped and forgotten about. At the end of the day, this game was such a colossal failure that no attempt to salvage it or bring it back in any form has come back since, and it's very safe to say that it never will. This is a game that had a really interesting concept behind it. but at more or less every stage of its creation, it was just an absolute disaster. And it's one that barely anyone has ever heard of, despite the scale. And that's what makes it so interesting. You know, we are all about finding really obscure games that you will never have heard of before. Hab 12, no one had heard of that before we covered it. Sure, people did actually report on it. After all, we found it really randomly in a gaming magazine. But this game is something that pretty much no one knew about. The only real footage of it you can find online on places like YouTube is from a guy called No Ignition who posted and leaked material from the game specifically because he was really angry at the developers and the project and how everything had gone. You know, and that's
Yeah.
very telling that the only way you can find out about this game currently is through a disgruntled ex-employee who hated the leadership of the project so much that
Two
he
employees, two disgruntled employees, because there's another YouTuber that actually leaked some more videos too.
yeah
Even two videos which show Jeremy Stieglitz, the founder of Artificial Studios and the guy that even fathered the idea of Reich, basically presenting the game to investors or whoever he's presenting it to. So you can find videos right now explaining, like, that explain to you what the game is and, you know, some specifics. And if you go into some descriptions and comment sections, and if you're willing to use a Wayback Machine, you can find a lot of stuff in the public domain which regard to the companies, to individuals, to anything. Just
mm,
that we have an ace up our sleeve, and that is that Oscuro is about stuff you never heard of before, that you never saw before. So we got media that no one has ever seen before. We got information that 100% clarifies what at least the final stages of the game were supposed to look like. For instance, we got the game design document. So
mm,
we got a game design document. We got quite a few videos. And we got, of course, contacts that told us details about the project and went into detail with it too. So we have a pretty good idea of how the final game might have looked like, and we have a pretty good idea of how it was like coming up with these ideas. So, but now that we're talking about that, why don't we just leak it?
well, the reason is quite simply it's not our philosophy, because at the end of the day, what Oscuro is about is telling these stories in a reasonable, responsible way. At the end of the day, this might be, you know, quite small scale as a production, but it is. And as journalists, you are at the least supposed to be held to certain standards. And when that when that comes to us, the way that applies to us is that we have certain rules that we are very keen not to break. If people don't want to be mentioned or go on the record, we don't put them on the record. We don't put people on the spot. At the end of the day, people will only appear in our documentaries if they want to. And if they want their names to be censored, if they don't want uh, their statements to be public, they won't be. And second, leak stuff, because at the end of the day, this series relies entirely on developer confidence. Even in a case like this game, where we couldn't just go to the developers, the company, and its leadership and ask them, give us materials on this game and help us tell this story, because the company doesn't exist, and most of the people who were involved with it, you know, have gone on is in other games companies in other places. Um, but at the end of the day, you need to have a certain level of confidence with the people you're talking to, where they feel that they can share stuff with you, and you will not go out and just publish it.
Hmm?
as people might have an appetite for this stuff, as much as people might just want to see every ounce of material we've gathered, at the end of the day, some stuff should not be publicized because the developers would prefer that it not be. And in order to tell our stories, we need them to tell us theirs. And they're only going to do that if they feel confident with sharing things with us. And the people we've talked to do, because when we assure them we will not publish anything you don't, that is a major priority and a key part of our mindset. And this was especially the case with Hab 12. The Hab 12 documentary was a very extensive documentary. It was very long. It went into lots of detail about what Hab 12 was supposed to be, what the story was going to be like, what the gameplay was going to be like. But there was still plenty of material behind that that never made it into the documentary, that didn't even make it into the bonus stuff that you can buy, and you should buy it because it's a very good product. But there's a lot of stuff we got that we read through that we never. When we asked Ratloop, can we publish this? They said no. There was material they didn't want us to put out, so we didn't. Because, unless game material just gets leaked in its entirety, you have to actually appeal to the people behind these projects in order to report on them. And those people are only going to take an interest in us if we have a certain standard, that they can talk to us and that we will act in the best interests of everyone involved. And that is our main mindset, is we want to tell stories, but we want to tell them responsibly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, especially with the leaking points where, we, for instance, with Reich, I think we might be able to get away with actually posting the prototypes and game builds that we find. Only problem is that we still don't know, like, if we should, because there are other reasons to it. For instance, what if these prototypes, gameplay demos, whatever, what if they have materials inside of them that infringe on copyright? And for instance, those were in like work in progress builds. They were never meant to be seen by anyone. What if they used placeholders of specific copyrighted materials that were inside these work in progress builds, and we publish them, and then we are held accountable for publishing these things? What if we get kind of pointed out, like, why are they posting these gameplay demos by other developers, and then we are screwing up our chances at future potential Oscuro productions simply because we decided to post that one gameplay build that we found cool. So we are very, very anxious when we think about, like, should we leak anything? And the answer to almost every single situation is a very clear, definite no, we should not do this, because we don't even have the capacity to do it. We don't have the interest to do it. But here's the thing why I think you do not even need to download a prototype. For one, these games are very limited for most part. Most of the Oscuro productions that you will see in the future were never finished, of course, because they never released, or they're so obscure you might not even know they were released, right? And the whole point of making a documentary about these productions is so that you do not need to go out and experience it yourself to fully understand what it is, what it was, and how it operated. So Hab 12 is a very good example. Hab 12 has a game design document that is like 300 pages long, and 200 of those pages are story. To be very honest, I did not read 200 pages of game story and progression, like, fully, with my full attention put to them, for for basically 99% of the game that were never even finished, that
Mm,
were never even worked on. So
mm,
why should, like, there is a lot of information that you do not really need to consider. There is a lot of information that is interesting and that you should consider. But then when it comes to the gameplay builds themselves, what was HEP 12? HEP 12 was a single level of a game that was never finished. And even though I talked to the Red Loop guys and told them that I think it's important that they should release the game and its soundtrack, and actually the guy that made the soundtrack, I don't want to say his name wrong. I think James Anderson. Wait, let me check. Check. James. Well, I don't. It says James on Discord. You saw it pop up in Elwood's screen because it's screen grabbing from Discord. But yeah, James Lando, like he made the soundtrack to F12 like 21 years ago, and it sounds amazing. And when I heard it, I told him, "Man, you need to release this." Didn't get a reply back. So I think that the idea of actually releasing the soundtrack or releasing the gameplay demo has been rejected. But in the end, it's their copyright and it's their production. And even if the copyright to HAP 12 expired, or I don't know if it did, but maybe if it did, and I would have, the possibility to leak it, why should I when the people that made it told me it's better if you don't? You know, I don't want to get my butt sued, and I do not want to be an asshole. So that's pretty much the bottom line of it, right?
yeah. At the end of the day, uh, as much as we want to encourage uh, publicity, for stuff about these cancelled games to come out, for the developers to tell their stories and to publish their own material. At the end of the day, some developers don't want to do that, either because they don't want to reopen old wounds, or they just don't think there's any need, or just because they don't think it's appropriate. And at the end of the day, even while we might disagree and we might encourage uh, the other side of things, at the end of the day, we don't get the casting vote because these are other people's projects. They don't belong to us, they're not ours. We're simply looking at them from an outside lens. We are researching, we are reporting. So it's not our place to decide what gets done with these materials at the end of the day because they don't belong to us. So the developers have every right to say, no, we don't feel that this, that, and the other should come out. Of course, when it comes to this game, right, it's a bit different because there is no remnants of the actual development company left. So there is no, central leadership of the company that's saying we don't want this to come out. But basically, what that means is that discretion is more sort of autonomous in that it's the individual developer who sends us material that will basically have a say in whether or not it goes out and what we do with it. So instead of consulting with the company, we're consulting with lots and lots of different individuals. A lot of conversations like that of people who've shared things and said things, and we have to talk about uh, what we can publish, uh, in what form we can publish it, and what it will be used for. And especially with a project like this, that has been a heavy task because we have, I think it's well over 10 hours worth of interview material. Not all of that at all is going to make it into this documentary. We're not going to do a 10-hour documentary about every single little detail that made it in with this game. So really we are deciding, what has to be included, and the developers' voices are a major part of that.
Yeah, and especially with these interviews, there's a lot of them that, you know, a lot of these interviews that they shared insights that we would be uncomfortable to go, like, to link back to them, or for instance, we're of course not gonna disclose who shared what, at least to a significant extent. Like if, of course, like for instance, Corey Collins, he like shared with me animation reels where he showcased his work on Reich, and I don't feel uncomfortable saying that he did. This is why I'm saying it right now, because in the end, he was showing me a demo reel of work that he specifically did for the project. He gave me permission to basically, use the files, to say his name. He said, use everything, my name, my voice, everything. This very recording, everything. So there's people like that, but then there's people that disclosed some very troubling information about potential fraud at the company, about even conspiracies that went on inside the company. And that is stuff that is either completely off the table or impossible to fully disclose, at least, when it comes to, us not wanting to get sued or us not wanting to get people dragged into lawsuits. So that's the main thing about this project. Like we can get in hot water here, and we do not want to. We do not want to test the waters because you might say that I like, oh, the oscuro guys don't have a backbone. Well, we are not millionaires either, so we're pretty regular people with pretty regular jobs, or still in education, and we cannot afford to be indebted for life. So
Yeah,
we're
we
not gonna
keep
go.
costs.
We are not gonna go in a lawsuit direction. So that's not gonna happen. So
Yeah.
anyone that says that we are pussies, well, you do it yourself.
At the
Fine,
end of the
yeah,
day, this is a game that has way more drama surrounding it. And naturally, that means way more accusations, way more things that put certain people in a bad light. And at the end of the day, what we have to do is try our best to be at least somewhat impartial and say, is this the sort of accusation that we can report as if it were a fact? No. Is this the sort of thing that we can talk about, directly? Maybe not. There are some things that we can hint towards, but not go into the specifics. There are some things that we just can't talk about at all because it's not worth the trouble it would bring. And that doesn't mean that there's not going to be lots of crazy shit brought up in this documentary, because there will be. There will be lots of stories. You will hear about lots of stuff, and you will get a very good insight into what this game was, what it was like, what its development process was like, and how it all came crashing down. So there will be plenty to hear of. It's just that there are some things that we have to make editorial decisions on and say, okay, this is the kind of thing that we don't want to include or that we can't include.
yeah, yeah. And that's what we're going through right now. There's first, we now have transcripts of every interview that we have, and now we're sorting through the quotes of everything that has been said, going through timestamps, and then gauging, okay, what are we gonna put into our documentary and what are we gonna leave out. And it is a difficult process because there's a lot of interesting little information, and most likely the way we're gonna go is by making a rough cut that's maybe gonna be I don't know, 3 to 4 hours long, and then we're gonna trim everything down as much as possible so we can cut the 3 to 4 hours down to maybe an hour or maybe even 40 minutes, because we don't know how much information, how much interesting information that is of value we can share about the game itself, for one, and second, the development process around the game. So it's gonna be a bit of a difficult little pickle. Like,
And this will be the major difference between this documentary and the first one. Is with the first one, our interest was very much about Hab 12, the game. The developers involved with it were more or less the backdrop because they were very relevant, of course. They're the people who made it, so they give us a lot of insight. But what we were trying to do was discover the game. With Reich, half of it was discovering the game, and half of it was understanding the process behind its creation. And a lot of this documentary is about the people and about the processes of the game's making rather than the game itself. Because to be honest, most of the game existed on paper. Even at the very end, in terms of actual raw gameplay content, it was very lacking. So the focus will very much be on the story. And that means that we have to make sure that that story we're talking about is consistently relevant and interesting to watch. Because at the end of the day, we could include 5, 6, 7, 10 hours worth of material just on everything we've heard. But the reality is, a lot of that stuff is maybe the sort of thing that you would go, that's interesting as a mild curiosity. But if we included every little bit of that, we'd be here forever. What we need to do is cut things down into something that is very concise, that tells the story we want to tell, that gives you all the main details that allow you to understand the making of this game uh, without getting lost in the small print.
yeah, and going forward, as you might have noticed by the fact that now we have a podcast titled After Oscuro, the direction of this very YouTube channel is definitely gonna be, at least I think it's gonna be a permanent switch to the big productions, to the Oscuro series, to future documentary productions or film productions that um, are interesting to me, because in the end, I mean, this channel exists because I'm interested in certain topics, and I choose to like create stuff that I find interesting. Um, because now with a 30 hour a week job, we might have a budget now, but that doesn't mean that I have infinite time. I have way less time, so shorter
Originally,
videos are like the smaller videos about sound design, game design, whatever. A lot of them are not gonna come out that frequently. Maybe as a little like creative thing, because in the end, I also have kind of lost a lot of interest for playing many video games anyways. So I'm more interested in the research aspects. I'm more interested in creating big productions which have a budget. And I think that in the end products are gonna be way better anyways. And these little
yeah.
podcasts, they definitely serve as a way to bring across some nuggets of information that you might find interesting.
Yeah, because originally it was very easy to make both small videos and the bigger ones because there was so much time to do it. Now that is not necessarily the case. So a focus has to be made either on the smaller content or these big documentary projects. And at the end of the day, we feel that the Oscuro series and these bigger documentaries will give something much more worthwhile to watch. An hour or so worth of major insight into a big project is at the end of the day going to be way more interesting than a 5, 3, 7 minute video about some aspect of game design. That doesn't mean that they're interesting or that they aren't worth making. It's just that there has to be prioritizing. There has to be a point where you say, okay, this should be the focus. And Oscuro is our focus simply because it has so much more potential as a more professional project as something that will be more interesting, that people will be able to get a lot more out of. And it's a series that has a lot more potential for longevity because there's always going to be these stories to tell, these things we can discover. We already have several more games after this one that we're considering for future projects. At the end of the day, we're still working on one thing at a time, but we have plenty of material to look at for future episodes of Oscuro if people are enthusiastic about this project like we are, because there are lots of cancelled games out there. There are a lot of things that people like you have not heard of. There are a lot of games that even people like me have not heard of. Some random luck leads us to stumble across it, or, you know, we get some insight from a random source. At the end of the day, uh, these discoveries can come from the most random of places, and we're really looking forward to being able to share them with you guys.
And yeah, that's also one thing that I wanted to point out when it comes to the productions themselves, like like some motivations behind them, some like why am I not involved in gamers, for instance, who I made my personal frenemies, in the sense of I actually love game documentaries like from No Clip and from gamers. But what I hate is that a lot of game documentaries are either about games that are super fucking popular and actually released, or about games in general, but without really a push in the domain of unknown information. So either most productions are gonna look on surface level public domain information, and others that go for interviews and never before seen stuff mainly focus on games that are pretty well known anyways. Good example would be Half-Life 2, a no clip documentary about arcane games that have never been released. But if you consider The Crossing, for instance, or Half-Life 2 Episode 4, those are games that are already pretty well known in the sphere of cancelled games, and
Yeah, exactly.
are very sought after. So of course, having interviews and gameplay footage about these games is highly interesting. Or in the case of gamers actually covered Reich before. That's something that is not well known. Why? Because the Reich documentary has been taken down, and we still don't really know why. I think it's because of demonetization issues, but they never put it back up again. Just that, from what I gathered, that documentary most likely was only on information that was in the public domain, and the title of the documentary was something along the lines of "A game too ambitious to be made." I can say one thing: the game was not too ambitious. The game actually did run on PS3s, Xbox 360s, and PCs. The game, pretty much everyone that I talked to told me that, technically speaking, the game did not fail. It was all management problems. So there we go. We have found information that completely, that would clarify these aspects, these, things that, if you look in the public domain alone, sometimes you're like, it could be like that, it could be like this. That's true. But then when you keep digging, you might actually find answers which are, relevant to the discussion. And I just wish that there were more productions that would do this to games that are truly obscure, truly forgotten. And HAB 12 was one of those games. Reich is one of those games. And we have way more games that you never heard of before, like, I don't know, have you heard of Xenozoic? Me neither. Did I make that name up? I don't know. You can look it up. I mean, if you're sure that I didn't make it up, you can look it up. But like Xenozoic, I mean, that sounds interesting. Did you hear of it before? No, of course not, because it never released. So this is what we're talking about here. Like, we're actually trying to find out about interesting game projects that truly, literally have never been heard of before. And, up until now, these games that we found are mostly from companies that do not have that are not really that mainstream, or that really deserve to be a little bit more popular. Like, for instance, the Red Loop guys, they're making really interesting games. Or one company that we're like in the talks with, Ace Team, they they I actually played the beta of their newest game, The Eternal Cylinder. Very creative game, very good game so far. I played that and it was an amazing experience. And these guys still make games, and they're there, and they they are fine with us kind of showing off these games that were never seen before. But then, will people care about it? That's the other question, because I had 12 documentary, not many people saw it, like 1,300 people. It's more than zero. So that's pretty good. So at least some people know about the production. But if you think about it, we're a pretty exclusive club right here. You, me, Elwood, and the other people that worked on the Oscuro doc for HAT 12, we're the only people that know about the game existing. Like, we are the only ones. Like, the gamers people, they don't know. Or the rest of the world, like, they don't know. Only we know, and it was a really good game. So this is why I think it's interesting to actually go for games that are that obscure,
Yeah.
that low profile, literally never heard of before. So if you are a developer that worked on a game that went under, exploded, and was never heard of ever again, or that no one even knows of that ever existed, you can contact me. There should be an email below. It's either going to be my personal email or my business mail that I check once in every eon. So write me a mail if you have something, or go write me something on Twitter so I can actually use that platform for one. So yeah, I think I said everything I wanted to say. Do you want to get something off your chest?
Pretty much. So far, this has been a project that is, fitting for the title, quite obscure. It's not gotten a tremendous amount of views at least on YouTube so far. What we're really aiming to do here is grow this project and promote it, and hopefully more people will see it, because at the end of the day, it is done to an amazingly professional standard. It is really well edited, really well made in general.
Thank you.
And and I think more people should see it, and a lot of people would have an interest in it. So we know that there is an audience out there for this series. Presumably, I'm right if you're watching. But really, what we want to do with this next project is go all in. This is going to be a much bigger project, a much more interesting project, and one that we're going to do more to promote. Because the first documentary, we kind of put it out there, and it was watched within our sort of circles, but outside of that, it wasn't that discoverable. This is what we want to change with this episode. We want you guys to watch it. We want you guys to enjoy it. We want you guys to get new insights from it. We want you guys to find lots of curiosities. And really, we want to just show off what we can do when it comes to making a professional documentary production. So check it out. Check out everything we've made, and we're going to be doing more to show it off, more to promote it, more to show you guys what we can do in the future. So this is going to be Oscuro episode 2. We are going to be covering Reich, the game made by UTV Ignition, a game that was an absolute train wreck, a disaster beyond anybody's wildest dreams or nightmares. This is going to be a clusterfuck of an episode. But is it going to be really enjoyable to make? Yes. Is it going to be even more enjoyable for you guys to watch? Yes. Believe me, this will be worth tuning into. There are lots of stories to find out about, and we hope that you're going to be looking forward to watching it just as much as we're looking forward to putting it out there and showing it off. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for dropping by and hearing us ramble on for about an hour about what we're up to. There's going to be more Oscuro material in the future, and we are going to be now hard at work on Project 2 because a lot of the smaller videos, they were coming out for a while, and while people really enjoyed them, they were diverting time away from working on this. So they will now more or less stop. The focus is going to be more or less 100% on making Oscuro Project 2 the best episode it can be. It is going to be a great sequel to our first documentary. Hopefully, it will be a very worthy successor, and hopefully, I won't screw up my part of it being QA and co-writing. Hopefully, I'll be decent at my job.
Let's hope. Let's
so,
hope.
so I'm really looking forward to people checking out our stuff.
Yeah, and by the way, about actually checking out our stuff, I also am very happy to say that we have actually been chosen to be the creator of the week for LBRY, the LBRY platform, which is a content sharing platform that currently is trying to compete with YouTube with their platform Odyssey. But I'm a big believer in LBRY. So if you are interested in watching our documentaries or any other production that I've ever created on my Chica YouTube channel, you can go either to YouTube and watch all of them ad-free. Yes, I demonetized my channel. I demonetized it. So that's something. I worked so hard to actually monetize my channel, and then I demonetized it as soon as I got a job. That's amazing, isn't it? And then you will also be able to watch every documentary, every production, everything that I will ever do over on LBRY, or services that are based on the LBRY protocol. So
yeah,
that also includes if you want to pay for the packages. If you actually want to buy a documentary package, like for instance the episode 1 package for HAP 12, you can buy it on either Gumroad, which will give us real actual money, like every package costs $15. So if you want to help us produce anything, you can buy it on Gumroad, or you will also be able to buy our productions through cryptocurrency over on LBRY. Because it is based on cryptocurrency, you can actually earn currency and then use it to buy whatever you want. So that is like a last message I wanted to kind of say. Like, we're available on multiple platforms, and if you want us to be on another YouTube alternative, I mean, you can write me on Twitter or on the YouTube comments. I read them. In the LBRY comments, I read all of them, and I will consider it. I will consider alternatives too. But anyways,
to all the supporters from all the different places that we host our stuff on, thanks for checking it out. In particular, the LBRY community, because LBRY was a platform that I initially really was not sold on when it came to bringing the videos and the documentary stuff onto that platform. I didn't think it would go anywhere. I didn't think it was worth much. And then it just kind of exploded. And there's been tons of support from LBRY, thousands and thousands of dollars worth of cryptocurrency parked on our account to promote it. The LBRY community has been very welcoming. We've had a lot of successes there. Yeah, and right now the channel's creator of the week, so clearly we must be doing something right. So thank you for the vote of confidence. We really appreciate it. And thankfully we're actually getting recognition, unlike fucking YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube it's all dependent on the algorithm, and hopefully we might be able to design our video title, thumbnail, and descriptions in a way in the future where if something happens in the YouTube sphere, we might actually get picked up more. Because for instance, any keen watchers of my channel that have been there for a long while might have seen the extra credits video that I made responding to responding to basically their ideas about, you know, normalizing Nazis and terrorists in video games. I'm bringing this up, by the way, because I used gameplay footage from Reich in that video. So if you want to find that clip, you might want to go there and check it out. You know, you might find it. Anyways, for instance, lately they made another video that is complete horse crap, which is about fantasy races. Is it good to make them inherently evil or good, whatever? And you know, because of that, now I'm getting thousands of views more on the old video that I created. So YouTube is crazy with the algorithm, and yeah, this is why we're also kind of starting to do a podcast now and revealing the project. Because if you guys search for Reich and you find the other videos, in the grand scheme of things, it might actually be helpful for us in the long term. But yeah, that has been the first episode of Oscuro Podcast. This one has been a reveal of Reich, basically a little update for people that have been watching for a while. We now have a budget. We like, what is the Oscuro philosophy? Now you know about that. We actually interviewed a shit ton of people to talk about the next project. So now you know that a production filled with drama is coming your way, and that the channel actually has money to put into its future productions. So thank you for watching, and if you're interested in Oscuro and everything related to that, then, you know, just keep watching these podcasts as they come
out. You've got a lot more to look forward to. We've got more coming. Thanks for watching.
Bye bye.